The digital clock on Emma Carter's phone read 5:23 a.m. as she raced through the crowded terminal of O'Hare International Airport. Her carry-on suitcase bounced wildly behind her, its wheels protesting against the polished floor. She was cutting it close. Boarding for her flight to San Francisco would end in exactly 7 minutes. After a grueling week of client meetings in Chicago, all she wanted was to get home, sink into her bathtub, and forget about the impending Monday deadline that her boss had dropped on her desk just before she left. Final boarding call for United Airlines Flight 1547 to San Francisco. All remaining passengers please proceed immediately to Gate C-17. The announcement echoed through the terminal, causing Emma's heart to race even faster. She couldn't miss this flight. Her presentation needed serious work over the weekend, and the thought of being stranded in Chicago for another night made her stomach clench with anxiety. Emma rounded the corner toward her gate, relieved to see that the boarding door was still open. Just as she approached the line, fumbling for her boarding pass, she heard a crash behind her, followed by a distressed male voice. "No, no, no, damn it!" Emma turned to see a man in a wheelchair struggling to retrieve scattered papers and a laptop that had fallen to the floor. His leather satchel had apparently tipped over, spilling its contents across the terminal floor. Other travelers hurried past, some casting sympathetic glances but none stopping to help. Emma glanced at the gate, then back at the man. The gate agent was already making the final announcement. "Last call for passenger Emma Carter on Flight 1547 to San Francisco." She hesitated for only a moment before hurrying over to the man in the wheelchair. "Let me help you," she said, kneeling to gather the papers that were now being scattered further by the air conditioning. "Thank you," the man replied, his voice deep and tinged with frustration. "I was trying to reach my ringing phone and everything just—" He gestured helplessly at the mess. Emma quickly collected the documents, noticing they appeared to be financial reports and business contracts. As she handed them back, she caught her first real look at the man. He appeared to be in his early 40s with striking gray eyes that contrasted against his olive skin. His dark hair was peppered with silver at the temples, and despite the casual attire, jeans and a navy sweater, there was something commanding about his presence. "I appreciate this," he said, carefully organizing the papers back into his satchel. "You're probably missing your flight right now." Emma glanced back at the gate. The door was closing. "It's fine," she lied, trying to mask her disappointment. "There'll be another one." "Gate C-17?" he asked, having obviously noticed the direction she'd been heading. Emma nodded, forcing a smile. "San Francisco." The man closed his eyes briefly, regret washing over his features. "I'm really sorry. I should have been more careful with my things." "It's not your fault," Emma assured him, though internally she was already calculating how this would affect her weekend work schedule. "These things happen." As the gate door shut with a definitive click, Emma felt a wave of exhaustion hit her. She'd have to go to customer service, try to get rebooked, possibly wait hours for the next available flight, all while her deadline loomed ever closer. "Let me make it up to you," the man said, interrupting her spiraling thoughts. "I'm Alexander, by the way, Alexander Harrington." He extended his hand. "Emma Carter," she replied, shaking it and noting his firm grip. "Well, Emma Carter, the least I can do is buy you a coffee while you figure out your next flight." Emma hesitated. In normal circumstances, she might have politely declined, but there was something about Alexander's genuine remorse and those uncommonly perceptive eyes that made her nod in agreement. "I could definitely use the caffeine," she conceded. Alexander smiled, revealing a dimple in his right cheek. "There's a decent cafe just past security. Shall we?" They made their way to the small airport cafe, which was surprisingly quiet for the early morning rush. After ordering a black coffee for him and a latte for her, they settled at a table near the window overlooking the tarmac. Emma watched her scheduled flight taxi toward the runway, trying not to visibly wince. "So, what takes you to San Francisco?" Alexander asked, stirring his coffee although he hadn't added anything to it. It seemed more of a habitual gesture than a practical one. "Home," Emma replied. "I live in the Mission District. I was here in Chicago for work. Marketing presentations for a client?" She took a sip of her latte, the warmth providing small comfort. "What about you? Business or pleasure?" A shadow crossed Alexander's face. "Medical consultation, actually. I come to Chicago every 3 months for it." Emma immediately regretted her question. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to pry." Alexander waved away her concern. "Don't be. It's been 6 years since the accident. I've grown used to discussing it." He leaned back in his wheelchair. "Rock climbing incident in Colorado. I was careless, the safety equipment failed, and here we are." He gestured to his legs. "Partial paralysis below the waist. The specialists here have been working with me on innovative treatments." Emma was struck by his matter-of-fact tone, devoid of self-pity. "And are they helping? The treatments?" "Incrementally," he replied with a small smile. "I can stand for short periods now, which is more than I could do a year ago. Progress is progress, however slow." Something in his calm acceptance made Emma feel slightly ashamed of her own frustration over a merely delayed flight. "That's a great perspective to have. Not always easy to maintain," he admitted, his gaze drifting to the window where planes were taking off and landing in the morning light. "But necessary." He turned back to her suddenly. "Have you contacted the airline yet about rebooking?" Emma shook her head. "I was just about to do that." She pulled out her phone, but before she could dial, Alexander spoke again. "Which airline was it?" "Pinnacle Airlines," Emma replied, scrolling through her contacts for the customer service number. Alexander's expression changed subtly, a flicker of something Emma couldn't quite read. "I see," he said, taking a sip of his coffee. "And you need to get back to San Francisco today?" "Ideally, yes. I have a presentation to finish for Monday, and all my notes are at home." Alexander nodded thoughtfully. "I may be able to help with that." Emma looked up from her phone, curiosity piqued. "How so?" Instead of answering directly, Alexander pulled out his own phone and made a brief call. "Hello, Marcus. Yes, it's Alex. I need a favor." He glanced at Emma. "I have a passenger who missed her connection to San Francisco on the morning Pinnacle flight. I'd like to have her accommodated on the next available flight, preferably with an upgrade to first class for the inconvenience." He paused, listening. "Carter, Emma Carter." Another pause. "Excellent. Thank you, Marcus." He ended the call and turned to Emma with a slight smile. "You're booked on the 8:30 a.m. flight, first class. They'll have your boarding pass waiting at the gate." Emma stared at him, bewildered. Do you work for Pinnacle?" Alexander's smile widened, revealing that dimple again. "In a manner of speaking, yes." "Are you some kind of executive?" Emma asked, unable to hide her curiosity. Alexander laughed softly. "Something like that." He checked his watch. "You have about 2 hours before your new flight. More coffee?" Emma nodded, still processing what had just happened. As Alexander wheeled himself to the counter to order refills, she quickly pulled out her phone and searched Alexander Harrington Pinnacle Airlines. The search results made her breath catch. Alexander Harrington, CEO and majority owner of Pinnacle Airways, announces expansion to international routes. Harrington's remarkable journey, from tragedy to transforming Pinnacle into a major carrier. Billionaire Alexander Harrington discusses innovation in airline industry post-accident. Emma quickly put her phone away as Alexander returned with their coffees. She tried to compose her expression, but he must have caught something in her eyes. "You Googled me, didn't you?" he asked, not unkindly. Emma felt her cheeks warm. "I'm sorry, I was just curious," he finished for her. "It's completely understandable." He set her fresh latte in front of her. "Though I was enjoying just being Alexander for a while rather than Alexander Harrington, CEO." Emma took a sip of her latte to hide her embarrassment. "I apologize if I made you uncomfortable." Not at all, he assured her. Though I hope it doesn't make you uncomfortable either. I'm still the same person who clumsily dropped his belongings all over the terminal floor. His easy manner helped Emma relax slightly. I'm just surprised. You don't exactly match the image I had of an airline CEO. Let me guess, Alexander said with mock seriousness. You pictured someone older, probably wearing a suit worth more than your monthly rent, barking orders into a phone while ignoring everyone around them? Emma laughed. Something like that. Well, I do own some ridiculously expensive suits, he admitted with a grin. But I find they clash with the wheelchair aesthetic. His ability to joke about his condition caught Emma off guard again. This was not how she'd expected her morning to go, missing her flight only to end up having coffee with the billionaire owner of the airline. I appreciate you arranging the new flight, Emma said sincerely. You really didn't have to do that. Of course I did, Alexander replied. You missed your flight because you stopped to help me. It was the least I could do. He paused, studying her for a moment. Though I must admit, I'm selfishly glad for the chance to have coffee with someone who didn't know who I was for at least 15 minutes. The conversation flowed surprisingly easily after that. Emma learned that Alexander had purchased the then-struggling Pinnacle Airlines shortly after his accident, partly as a distraction from his rehabilitation process. Under his leadership, the company had grown from a regional carrier to one of the most innovative airlines in the industry. In turn, Emma told him about her work in marketing, her small apartment in San Francisco that she shared with an antisocial cat named Fitzgerald, and her dreams of eventually starting her own agency. As their conversation continued, Emma found herself increasingly drawn to Alexander's intelligence and unexpected humor. She almost forgot about her upcoming flight until an announcement for boarding at a nearby gate reminded her to check the time. It's nearly 8, she said, surprised at how quickly the time had passed. I should probably head to my gate soon. Alexander nodded, though Emma thought she detected a hint of disappointment in his eyes. Of course, I've kept you long enough. You haven't kept me, Emma said quickly. This was nice. Unexpected, but nice. Alexander smiled, reaching into his satchel to pull out a business card. Here, he said, handing it to her, in case you ever miss another flight. Emma took the card, running her thumb over the embossed lettering. Thank you for the coffee and the flight. My pleasure, Alexander replied, his gray eyes holding hers for a moment longer than necessary. Safe travels, Emma Carter. As Emma walked toward her gate, she felt a peculiar mix of emotions. The morning had taken such an unexpected turn that she almost felt disoriented. She glanced back once to see Alexander still at the table, watching her go. Little did she know that this chance encounter would change the course of her life forever. The first-class cabin on Pinnacle Airlines felt like another world compared to Emma's usual economy experience. Plush seats that reclined into beds, attentive flight attendants offering champagne before takeoff, and enough legroom that even her small carry-on fit comfortably beneath the seat in front of her. As she settled in, Emma couldn't help but think about the man responsible for this unexpected luxury. Alexander Harrington. His business card felt heavy in her pocket, a tangible reminder that their chance meeting had been real and not some strange dream born of travel exhaustion. The flight attendant approached with a warm smile. Ms. Carter, Mr. Harrington asked that we take special care of you today. Would you like champagne or perhaps coffee? Coffee, please, Emma replied, still slightly uncomfortable with the special treatment. Black. As the plane took off, Emma gazed out the window at Chicago growing smaller beneath her. She tried to focus on the presentation awaiting her at home, but her thoughts kept drifting back to those penetrating gray eyes and the surprising ease of their conversation. Alexander wasn't what she'd expected a billionaire CEO to be. There had been no pretension in his manner, no condescension when she'd admitted to working in mid-level marketing. Instead, he'd listened to her career aspirations with genuine interest. asking thoughtful questions that made her feel truly heard. Emma sighed, shaking her head slightly. What was she doing? Analyzing a brief encounter with a man she'd never see again as if it meant something. She pulled out her laptop, determined to use the flight time productively. 3 hours later, Emma unlocked the door to her apartment in San Francisco's Mission District. Fitzgerald, her large orange tabby, greeted her with his usual mix of disdain and reluctant affection, winding between her legs once before stalking off to resume his nap on the windowsill. "I missed you too, Fitz," Emma called after him, dropping her suitcase by the door and surveying her small but comfortable home. The apartment wasn't much, a one-bedroom with a kitchenette and a living area barely large enough for her second-hand sofa and small desk, but it was hers, and after 5 days away, it felt like heaven. Emma kicked off her shoes, made a quick sandwich, and spent the rest of the day working on her presentation, determined to put thoughts of Alexander Harrington out of her mind. By Sunday evening, she'd nearly succeeded. The presentation was ready, her laundry was done, and she'd even managed to grocery shop for the week ahead. The only reminder of her unusual airport encounter was the business card she'd placed on her refrigerator, held in place by a magnet from a local pizza place. Monday morning arrived with San Francisco's characteristic fog and a text from her boss, Diane, asking her to come in early to review the presentation before the client meeting. Emma groaned but replied with a cheerful, "On my way," before dragging herself out of bed. The offices of Marston Media occupied half a floor in a downtown building with decent views of the bay, when the fog allowed. Emma had been with the company for 3 years, having worked her way up from assistant to account manager. She enjoyed her job for the most part, though lately she'd been feeling stagnant, longing for more creative control than Diane typically allowed. "There you are," Diane said as Emma entered the conference room. A slim woman in her 50s with a perpetually harried expression, Diane had built her agency from nothing and ran it with an iron fist. "Let's see what you've got." Emma connected her laptop to the projector and began walking Diane through the campaign she'd developed for their newest client, a sustainable clothing brand looking to expand their market share. She was midway through explaining her social media strategy when Diane held up a hand. "It's safe," she said, not unkindly. "But we need distinctive, Emma. This campaign could be for any eco-friendly clothing line. Where's the spark that makes it uniquely verdant?" Emma bit back a defensive response, knowing Diane was right. "I can revise it before the meeting at 2. Diane nodded, gathering her papers. "Do that. And remember, Verdant isn't just another client. If we land this account permanently, it could transform the agency." Alone in the conference room, Emma rubbed her temples, feeling a headache forming. Diane was right. Her presentation was competent, but unmemorable. She'd been too distracted over the weekend, too caught up in thoughts of, no. She refused to blame her professional shortcomings on a brief encounter with a handsome CEO. This was on her. Emma spent the next 4 hours revamping the presentation, drawing inspiration from Verdant's mission statement about clothing that tells a story of sustainability. By the time the clients arrived, she had transformed the campaign into a narrative-driven approach that showcased the journey of each garment from eco-friendly materials to the consumer. The presentation went better than she'd dared hope. The Verdant team was enthusiastic, and even Diane seemed impressed, giving Emma a subtle nod of approval as the clients left with promises to finalize the contract by week's end. "Nice recovery," Diane said once they were alone. "That storytelling angle was exactly what they needed." "Thanks," Emma replied, relief washing over her. Something just clicked. Diane was about to respond when Emma's phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced down automatically, expecting it to be from her friend Mia about their standing Tuesday dinner plans. Instead, she saw an unknown number. "I hope your presentation went well. I've been thinking about our conversation. Alexander Harrington." Emma stared at the phone, her heart suddenly racing. How had he gotten her number? "Everything okay?" Diane asked, noticing her expression. "Fine," Emma said quickly, slipping the phone into her pocket. "Just a, delivery notification." Back at her desk, Emma pulled out the phone again, reading and rereading the message. They hadn't exchanged numbers, she was certain of that. Which meant he'd gone to the trouble of finding hers, a thought that was both flattering and slightly disconcerting. After several minutes of deliberation, she replied, "Presentation went well, thank you. Though I'm curious how you got my number?" His response came almost immediately. "Airline passenger records. A terrible abuse of power, I admit. I can delete it if you'd prefer." Emma couldn't help but smile at his honesty. "Slightly creepy, but I'll allow it. How was your day?" Their text conversation continued throughout the afternoon, interspersed between Emma's work tasks. Alexander was easy to talk to, his messages thoughtful and often laced with dry humor. She learned he was still in Chicago for follow-up appointments but would be returning to San Francisco, where Pinnacle's headquarters were located, by the end of the week. "Perhaps we could continue our conversation over dinner?" he suggested, causing Emma's pulse to quicken. She hesitated, her thumbs hovering over the screen. Was this a date? Or was he simply being friendly to someone who'd helped him? And more importantly, did she want it to be a date? Before she could respond, another text came through. "To be clear, I'm asking you out, but I understand completely if you'd rather not mix business with pleasure." Emma laughed at his directness, feeling a flutter of excitement. "Dinner would be nice," she replied before she could overthink it. "Though technically I'm not sure if missing your flight counts as business." "Friday, 7 p.m.? I know a place with an excellent view." Emma agreed, and they settled the details before she returned to her work, trying to ignore the anticipation building inside her. It was just dinner, she told herself. Nothing to get worked up about. But as the week progressed, Emma found herself increasingly nervous about their date. She told Mia about it over their Tuesday night tacos, seeking reassurance that she wasn't making a mistake. "Let me get this straight," Mia said, gesturing with her margarita glass. "You missed your flight because you were helping a hot guy in a wheelchair who turned out to be a billionaire airline CEO, and now he's taking you to dinner? That's literally the plot of a romance novel." Emma rolled her eyes. "It's not like that. He's just being nice because I helped him." "Right," Mia drawled skeptically. "And using his CEO powers to find your number and ask you to dinner is just being nice. Emma, the man is interested in you." "Even if he is," Emma argued, "it doesn't make sense. He could date anyone, models, socialites, whoever. Why would he be interested in a regular marketing manager with student loans and a cat who hates everyone?" Mia reached across the table to squeeze Emma's hand. "Because you're amazing, dummy. And clearly he saw that in the whole 15 minutes you spent together." By Friday evening, Emma had changed outfits 3 times before settling on a simple black dress that was professional enough for a work dinner, but elegant enough for a date. She wore her dark hair loose around her shoulders and applied just enough makeup to enhance her hazel eyes. At precisely 6:55 p.m., a sleek black car pulled up outside her apartment building. The driver, a professional-looking woman in a suit, introduced herself as Tessa. "Mr. Harrington sent me to collect you, Miss Carter," she explained, opening the rear door. Emma climbed in, half expecting to find Alexander inside, but the back seat was empty. "Is Mr. Harrington meeting us at the restaurant?" she asked as they pulled away from the curb. Tessa nodded, catching Emma's eye in the rearview mirror. "He's already there. It's about a 20-minute drive, depending on traffic." As they drove through the city, Emma watched the familiar neighborhoods give way to the upscale area near the bay. She'd expected them to stop at one of the fancy restaurants overlooking the water, but instead, Tessa turned onto a private road leading to what appeared to be a helipad. "There must be some mistake," Emma said, alarmed. "I thought we were going to a restaurant." Tessa smiled reassuringly. "No mistake, Miss Carter. Mr. Harrington is waiting for you there." She gestured toward a sleek helicopter sitting on the pad, its blades still. Standing beside it, illuminated by the setting sun, was Alexander. He'd exchanged his casual attire for a tailored suit that emphasized his broad shoulders, though he'd skipped the tie, leaving his collar open. He was seated in his wheelchair, but as the car approached, he reached for a pair of crutches leaning against the helicopter and slowly, carefully pulled himself to a standing position. The sight of him standing, clearly with effort but with determined dignity, made Emma's breath catch. As Tessa opened her door, Emma stepped out, suddenly aware of how much this evening already differed from any date she'd ever been on. "You're standing," she said as she approached him, immediately regretting the obvious statement. Alexander smiled, the warmth reaching his gray eyes. "Special occasion," he replied. "Worth the effort." He gestured to the helicopter. "I hope you don't mind a short flight. The restaurant is a bit unconventional." Emma glanced at the helicopter, excitement mingling with trepidation. "Where exactly are we going?" "That," Alexander said, his dimple appearing as his smile widened, "is a surprise. Do you trust me?" As their eyes met in the golden light of sunset, Emma found that, against all logic and perhaps against her better judgment, she did. The helicopter rose smoothly into the air, giving Emma a breathtaking view of San Francisco bathed in the golden glow of sunset. She sat beside Alexander, both of them wearing headsets to communicate over the noise of the rotors. He'd returned to his wheelchair once they were aboard, explaining that standing for long periods was still challenging, but the effort he'd made to greet her standing hadn't gone unnoticed. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Alexander's voice came through the headset, gesturing toward the spectacular panorama of the city transitioning from day to evening, lights beginning to twinkle on in office buildings and homes. "Incredible," Emma agreed, captivated by both the view and the surreal nature of her situation. A week ago, she'd been a regular marketing manager living a predictable life. Now she was in a private helicopter with a billionaire CEO who looked at her with an intensity that made her pulse quicken. They flew north over the Golden Gate Bridge, its iconic red towers piercing through the fog that was rolling in from the Pacific. Emma had lived in San Francisco for 5 years, but had never seen it like this, a city of dreams suspended between sea and sky. "I fell in love with flying long before I bought an airline," Alexander said, his eyes on the horizon. "My father was a pilot for commercial airlines. He'd take me up in small planes whenever he could. There's a freedom in the air that I've never found anywhere else." Emma detected a note of wistfulness in his voice. "Do you still fly yourself?" A shadow crossed his face. "Not since the accident, but I'm working on it. There are modified controls that would allow me to pilot again. It's one of my goals." There was a quiet determination in his words that touched Emma. She was beginning to understand that Alexander Harrington was a man who refused to be defined by his limitations. The helicopter banked gently to the right, heading toward what appeared to be a small, privately owned island just off the coast. As they approached, Emma could make out a beautiful structure perched on the highest point, a glass and steel modern building that gleamed in the last rays of sunlight. "Is that where we're going?" she asked, unable to hide her amazement. Alexander nodded, a hint of pride in his expression. "Harrington Island. A bit pretentious, I admit, but I didn't name it. It was a gift from the board of directors when Pinnacle's stock price tripled under my leadership." The helicopter descended onto a landing pad adjacent to the stunning building. Once they touched down, Alexander's pilot helped him back into his wheelchair while Emma took in her surroundings. The island was small but exquisitely landscaped, with winding paths and lush vegetation that appeared to have been designed to complement rather than dominate the natural rock formations. "The main house has a restaurant kitchen and a small staff," Alexander explained as they made their way along a smooth path toward the building. "I use it mainly for corporate retreats and special occasions. Tonight, we have it all to ourselves." The interior of the building was even more impressive than its exterior, open concept with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a 360-degree view of the ocean and distant cityscape. The center of the main room featured a single table set for dinner, illuminated by dozens of candles that cast a warm, intimate glow. "This is—" Emma trailed off, at a loss for words. "Too much?" Alexander asked, suddenly looking uncertain. "I considered a normal restaurant in the city, but privacy can be an issue for me in public places. People stare, ask inappropriate questions, some want to talk business during my personal time." "It's incredible," Emma assured him, touched by his vulnerability. "Though I'm definitely underdressed for a private island." Alexander's gaze traveled from her face down to her simple black dress and back up again, his appreciation evident. "You look perfect." A server appeared with champagne, then discreetly withdrew, leaving them alone with the spectacular view and each other. Alexander raised his glass. "To missed flights and fortunate accidents." Emma clinked her glass against his. "To unexpected journeys." The dinner that followed was extraordinary, course after course of exquisitely prepared food, each dish more delicious than the last. But what Emma would remember most was the conversation. Alexander asked her questions about her life, her work, her dreams, listening to her answers with genuine interest. In turn, he shared stories about his own journey, how his accident had forced him to reevaluate everything, how building Pinnacle into a successful company had given him purpose during the darkest days of his recovery. "The doctors initially told me I'd never stand again," he said as they finished their main course. "I spent 2 months believing them, wallowing in self-pity. Then one day, my physical therapist, a drill sergeant of a woman named Greta, said something I'll never forget." "What was that?" Emma asked, entranced by the play of emotions across his expressive face. She said, "Alexander, your legs may be damaged, but there's nothing wrong with your spine. It's time to find it again." He smiled at the memory. She was right. I'd lost more than the use of my legs in that accident. I'd lost my sense of self, my confidence. Finding it again was harder than any physical rehabilitation. Emma reached across the table without thinking, placing her hand over his. "I can't imagine going through something like that." Alexander turned his hand palm up, his fingers interlacing with hers. "We all face our own cliffs to fall from, Emma. Mine was just more literal than most." His thumb traced small circles on her wrist, sending shivers up her arm. "What about you? What challenges have shaped you?" Emma considered the question, conscious of his warm hand still holding hers. "Nothing as dramatic as yours. My parents divorced when I was young. My mother raised me alone, working 2 jobs to keep us afloat. She always told me that self-sufficiency was the greatest gift she could give me." "She sounds like a remarkable woman." "She was," Emma said softly. "She passed away during my 2nd year of college. Breast cancer." Alexander squeezed her hand gently. "I'm sorry." "It was a long time ago," Emma replied, though the loss still ached sometimes. "But it taught me not to take anything for granted. Time, relationships, opportunities." "Is that why you stopped to help me at the airport?" Alexander asked, "when everyone else walked by?" Emma considered this. Maybe, or maybe it was just the right thing to do. Their eyes held, and Emma felt something shift between them. A connection deeper than physical attraction, a recognition of kindred spirits despite their vastly different circumstances. The server returned to clear their plates and bring dessert, a decadent chocolate creation that Emma was too full to properly appreciate. As night fell completely, the view outside transformed. The ocean became a canvas of moonlight on dark water, while San Francisco glittered in the distance like a constellation of earthbound stars. After dinner, Alexander suggested a tour of the island. Despite the wheelchair accessibility of the main paths, Emma could tell that navigating the terrain required effort on his part, yet he showed no sign of strain or fatigue. He guided her to a small cove on the eastern side where the waves lapped gently against a pristine stretch of sand. "This is my favorite spot," he said, his voice quiet in the darkness. "When life gets overwhelming, I come here to remind myself how small our problems are in the grand scheme of things." Emma breathed in the salty air, feeling a peculiar sense of peace. "Thank you for sharing this with me." Alexander turned to look at her, his expression serious in the moonlight. "I don't bring many people here. To be honest, I don't date much at all since the accident." "Why not?" Emma asked, genuinely curious. He sighed, his gaze turning back to the ocean. "At first, it was because I was focused on recovery and rebuilding my life. Then, as Pinnacle became successful, it got complicated. People see the chair first, then the money. It's hard to know if someone is interested in me or what I represent." He glanced at her. "But you helped me before you knew who I was. That's rare in my world." The vulnerability in his admission touched Emma deeply. On impulse, she moved closer and rested her hand on his shoulder. "For what it's worth, I find the man much more interesting than his airline." Alexander reached up to cover her hand with his, then gently tugged her down until they were face to face. In the moonlight, his eyes were dark and intense, searching hers for permission. Emma's heart pounded as she leaned in, closing the distance between them. The kiss was gentle at first, a tentative exploration that quickly deepened as Alexander's hand came up to cradle her face. Emma felt a rush of warmth spread through her body, a sense of rightness that both thrilled and terrified her. When they finally parted, both were breathing harder, and Alexander's eyes had a dazed quality that likely mirrored her own. "I've been wanting to do that since I saw you running through the airport," he admitted, his voice rougher than before. Emma smiled, her hand still resting on his shoulder. "Even before you knew my name?" "Especially then. You were just a beautiful woman with kind eyes who stopped to help a stranger." His thumb traced the line of her jaw. "Though I must admit, getting to know you has only made me want to kiss you more." The sincerity in his voice made Emma's breath catch. This wasn't how dates usually went for her. There was an intensity, a connection that she couldn't explain away as mere physical attraction or the extraordinary setting. "It's getting late," Alexander said reluctantly, glancing at his watch. "I should get you home." The helicopter ride back to the city was quieter, a comfortable silence falling between them as they both processed the evening's events. Emma's mind was racing with questions about what this meant, where it could possibly go. A relationship with someone like Alexander Harrington would be complicated in ways she couldn't even imagine. As the helicopter approached the helipad where they'd started their evening, Alexander turned to her. "I have to fly to New York tomorrow for meetings, but I'll be back on Monday. Would you have dinner with me again?" In the dim light of the cabin, his expression was earnest, almost boyishly hopeful. Despite all her practical concerns, Emma found herself nodding. "I'd like that," she said honestly. The helicopter touched down, and Tessa was waiting with the car to take Emma home. Alexander accompanied her to the vehicle, his hand resting lightly on the small of her back. "Thank you for tonight," Emma said as they reached the car. "It was unlike anything I've ever experienced." "That makes two of us," Alexander replied before leaning in to kiss her once more, briefly but with unmistakable promise. "Good night, Emma." As Tessa drove her back to her apartment, Emma gazed out the window at the city lights, knowing that something significant had changed in her life. Whatever was beginning between her and Alexander Harrington, whether it lasted a week or longer, she sensed it would leave a permanent mark on her heart. Emma floated through the weekend in a dreamy haze, replaying every moment of her evening with Alexander. Fitzgerald seemed particularly annoyed by her distracted state, repeatedly knocking items off her coffee table until she finally focused enough to refill his food bowl. By Sunday afternoon, she'd told Mia every detail of the date at least twice. "A private island," Mia repeated, sprawled across Emma's sofa with an expression of amused disbelief. With a helicopter ride and dinner prepared by his personal chef. Em, this is insane. I know, Emma groaned, burying her face in a throw pillow. It's too much. Too much in a good way, though, right? Mia prodded, reaching for her glass of wine. I mean, the man clearly wants to impress you. Emma lowered the pillow, her expression troubled. That's what worries me. His world is so different from mine. Private islands and helicopters aren't normal date activities for someone like me. Why should that matter if you like each other? Because it changes things, Emma insisted. The power dynamic, expectations, everything. Plus, he's literally my boss's 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 boss, or whatever the corporate hierarchy would be since he owns the airline I flew on. Mia rolled her eyes. You're overthinking this. Did you have fun? Yes, Emma admitted. Did you like him? The actual person, not the CEO? Emma thought of Alexander's quiet vulnerability when he spoke about his accident, the way his eyes crinkled when he smiled, how attentively he'd listened to her stories. Yes. Then maybe just enjoy it and see where it goes? Emma wished it could be that simple, but something held her back. A nagging worry that she was stepping into a world where she didn't belong, where she could too easily lose herself. Monday morning brought a return to reality as she headed into work, though the normalcy was disrupted when a delivery arrived at the Marston media offices just before lunch, an extravagant arrangement of white orchids with a simple note, "Thinking of you from 3,000 miles away. A." Diane raised an eyebrow as Emma tried to casually place the massive arrangement on her desk without drawing attention. Secret admirer? Something like that, Emma mumbled, feeling her cheeks warm. Well, whoever he is, he has good taste, Diane remarked before heading into a meeting, leaving Emma to fend off curious glances from her co-workers. Throughout the day, Alexander texted her between his meetings in New York, simple messages asking how her day was going, sending a photo of the view from his hotel, mentioning something that had reminded him of their conversation. Each text made Emma smile, yet also intensified her confusion about where this could possibly lead. That evening, as she was cooking dinner in her tiny kitchen, her phone rang with Alexander's number. I hope I'm not interrupting. His deep voice came through the speaker, sending an involuntary shiver down her spine. Just making pasta, Emma replied, cradling the phone against her shoulder as she stirred the sauce. How was your day of high-powered meetings? Tedious, he sighed, though significantly brightened by thoughts of a certain marketing manager in San Francisco. Emma felt a flutter in her stomach at his words. The flowers were beautiful and slightly embarrassing. My entire office is now speculating about my love life. His laugh was warm and rich. I apologize for the speculation, but not for the flowers. I wanted you to know I was thinking of you. There was a pause. I've thought about little else since our date, to be honest. Emma's heart beat faster. Me too, she admitted softly. I'll be back late tomorrow night, Alexander continued. Would Wednesday evening work for dinner? Somewhere in the city this time. Slightly more conventional. Wednesday works, Emma agreed, trying to ignore the anticipation building inside her. Though I should warn you, normal restaurants might be a letdown after a private island. It's not the location that matters, Alexander replied, his voice lowering slightly. It's the company. Their conversation continued as Emma finished cooking and ate her dinner, flowing naturally from topic to topic. Alexander told her about his meetings with investors, his plans for expanding Pinnacle's routes to Asia, and his frustration with New York's inaccessible subway system. Emma shared stories about her day, including Diane's approval of their newest campaign and her ongoing battle with the office coffee machine. It struck Emma how comfortable it felt, this exchange of daily minutiae. For a man who lived such an extraordinary life, Alexander seemed genuinely interested in the ordinary details of hers. "I should let you go," he said eventually, regret evident in his voice. "Early meeting tomorrow." "Of course," Emma replied, surprised to find it was nearly midnight. They'd been talking for hours. "Good night, Alexander." "Good night, Emma. Dream of me." After they hung up, Emma sat on her sofa, Fitzgerald purring in her lap, and allowed herself to acknowledge a frightening truth. She was falling for Alexander Harrington, falling hard and fast in a way she never had before, and that terrified her almost as much as it thrilled her. Wednesday arrived with uncharacteristic sunshine for San Francisco, as if the weather itself was conspiring to make the evening perfect. Alexander had texted that morning, "Car will pick you up at 7. Wear something comfortable. Looking forward to seeing you." Emma opted for dark jeans and a silky emerald blouse that brought out the green in her hazel eyes, paired with ankle boots that were stylish but wouldn't leave her limping by the end of the night. She was just applying a final touch of lip gloss when her buzzer rang. Tessa was waiting with the now familiar black car. "Good evening, Ms. Carter. Mr. Harrington is meeting you at the restaurant." The drive took them through the Mission and into North Beach, eventually stopping in front of a small, unassuming Italian restaurant tucked away on a side street. It didn't look like the type of place that would attract celebrities or billionaires, which Emma suspected was precisely why Alexander had chosen it. He was waiting inside, seated at a corner table partially screened by a wooden partition that offered some privacy without isolation. When he saw her, his face lit up with a smile that made Emma's heart skip. "You look beautiful," he said as she approached. "Thank you." Emma took in his appearance, charcoal slacks and a light blue button-down shirt that enhanced his gray eyes. He'd foregone the wheelchair tonight, using forearm crutches instead, a choice that Emma sensed was significant but didn't comment on. The restaurant was warm and intimate, with checkered tablecloths and candles in wax-covered Chianti bottles. The owner, an elderly Italian man named Marco, greeted Alexander like an old friend, kissing him on both cheeks before turning to Emma with a warm smile. "Ah, Alessandro finally brings a beautiful woman to my restaurant. I was beginning to worry about him." Marco winked at Emma. "You are too pretty for this one. But his heart, it is good." Emma laughed as Alexander shook his head with good-natured embarrassment. "Marco and I go way back," he explained once they were seated. "This place was my sanctuary after the accident. No one knew me here. No one stared or whispered. I could just be another customer enjoying good food." "It's lovely," Emma said, taking in the authentic charm of the place. "Very different from our last date. I thought we could use a change of pace. Something more real." The word hung between them, laden with meaning. Emma understood what he was trying to say, that he wanted to show her his authentic self, not just the billionaire CEO with access to private islands and helicopters. Marco brought them wine without being asked, along with a platter of antipasti that wasn't on the menu. "I make special dinner for Alessandro and his lady," he announced before disappearing back to the kitchen. Alexander raised his glass. "2 second dates." "2 second dates," Emma echoed, clinking her glass against his. The food was spectacular. Simple, rustic Italian dishes prepared with obvious love and skill. As they ate, their conversation deepened, moving beyond the getting-to-know-you exchanges of their first date into more substantial territory. "Tell me about your dream," Alexander said as they shared a plate of tiramisu. "You mentioned wanting to start your own agency someday. What's holding you back?" Emma considered the question. "Money, mostly. Starting an agency requires capital, clients willing to take a chance on you, a reputation strong enough to attract talent." "But that's the practical side. What about the emotional barrier?" His perception startled her. "What do you mean?" Alexander's gaze was gentle but knowing. "In my experience, when capable people delay pursuing their dreams, it's rarely just about practical concerns. There's usually fear involved. Fear of failure, of rejection, of discovering you're not as good as you thought." Emma stared at him, feeling uncomfortably exposed. That's perceptive. I've been there, he said simply. After the accident, I almost sold my shares in my previous company instead of fighting to stay on as CEO. The practical reason was my recovery, but the real reason was fear, that I couldn't lead effectively from a wheelchair, that the board would lose confidence in me, that clients would see weakness. What changed your mind? My physical therapist, Greta. Alexander smiled at the memory. She told me I could hide from the world if I wanted, but I'd be hiding from myself too, and that the only real failure would be not trying. Emma absorbed his words, recognizing the truth in them. I am afraid, she admitted, not just of failing, but of succeeding and still feeling unfulfilled. Alexander reached across the table to take her hand. That's a very honest fear. But from what I've seen, Emma, you're someone who creates meaning in whatever you do. Your work matters to you because you make it matter. His words touched something deep within her, a recognition, a validation of a truth she hadn't fully articulated even to herself. Emma squeezed his hand, unable to form an adequate response. After dinner, they walked slowly along the waterfront, Alexander moving carefully with his crutches, Emma matching her pace to his. The night was clear, the bay a glittering expanse of moonlight and reflected city lights. I've missed you, Alexander said quietly as they paused to look out over the water. These past few days in New York felt longer because you weren't there. Emma turned to face him, struck by the raw honesty in his voice. I missed you too, she admitted, which is a little scary considering we barely know each other. Don't we? Alexander challenged gently. I feel like I've known you much longer than a week, like something in me recognized something in you. The intensity in his gaze made Emma's breath catch. I know what you mean, she whispered. Alexander shifted his weight, balancing on his crutches as he reached out to touch her face. I'm falling for you, Emma Carter, quickly and completely, and I need to know if that terrifies you. Emma closed her eyes briefly, leaning into his touch. Yes, she confessed, but not enough to make me walk away. His smile was radiant as he leaned in to kiss her, and Emma felt herself surrendering to the connection between them, letting go of her fears, at least for the moment. As the kiss deepened, a certainty grew within her. Whatever journey they were beginning together, it would change her life irrevocably. The weeks that followed transformed Emma's life in ways she could never have anticipated. Dating Alexander Harrington was like being caught in the most exhilarating whirlwind, at once thrilling and disorienting. Their relationship progressed with an intensity that sometimes left her breathless, each date bringing them closer, deepening their connection beyond anything Emma had experienced before. They settled into a pattern of sorts. When Alexander was in San Francisco, they would spend evenings together, sometimes at upscale restaurants where the staff greeted him by name, other times at hole-in-the-wall places Emma introduced him to. He seemed equally comfortable in both worlds, though Emma noticed he preferred venues where they could have privacy without isolation. When business took him away, which happened frequently, they spoke daily, sometimes for hours. Alexander sent gifts, rare first-edition books that matched her literary tastes, artisanal chocolates from whatever city he was visiting, once even a delicate silver bracelet with a tiny airplane charm that made her smile every time she glanced at her wrist. 1 month into their relationship, Emma found herself in Alexander's penthouse apartment in the city, a stunning space with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of San Francisco. The entire place had been designed for accessibility without sacrificing luxury. Wider doorways, modified kitchen counters, a state-of-the-art elevator from the private garage directly to his floor. "Your home is gorgeous," Emma said, running her fingers along the sleek marble countertop in his kitchen while Alexander opened a bottle of wine. "It's just a place," he replied, handing her a glass. "Though it's feeling more like a home with you in it." These moments of unguarded sincerity still caught Emma off guard, causing a flutter in her chest that was both pleasant and alarming. She'd learned that Alexander was a man who spoke his mind directly, especially about his feelings for her. "You know," Emma said, settling beside him on the sofa, "normal couples at this stage are still playing it cool, not confessing their deepest emotions." Alexander smiled, his gray eyes warming as he took her hand. "I stopped being interested in normal after the accident. Life's too short for games, Emma. I know what I feel for you. Why pretend otherwise?" Emma leaned in to kiss him, unable to resist the pull between them. The kiss deepened quickly, the wine forgotten as Alexander drew her closer. Their physical relationship had been progressing gradually, heated kisses and exploratory touches that always left Emma wanting more, but Alexander had been cautious, almost old-fashioned in his restraint. Tonight, however, something was different. There was an urgency in his touch as his hand slipped beneath her blouse, tracing the curve of her waist. Emma responded eagerly, her fingers working at the buttons of his shirt. "Emma," Alexander murmured against her neck, his voice rough. "Are you sure?" She pulled back to meet his gaze, seeing vulnerability beneath the desire in his eyes. "I'm sure," she whispered. Later, lying in his massive bed with the city lights twinkling beyond the windows, Emma traced lazy patterns on Alexander's bare chest. Their lovemaking had been a revelation, Alexander's physical limitations requiring creativity and communication that ultimately deepened their connection. He'd been attentive, passionate, and surprisingly playful, his confidence in this arena as evident as in every other aspect of his life. "What are you thinking?" he asked, his fingers combing gently through her hair. Emma propped herself up on one elbow to look at him. "That I'm happy," she said simply. "Happier than I've been in a long time." Alexander's smile was tender as he pulled her down for a soft kiss. "Me too," he whispered against her lips. "You're changing my life, Emma Carter." The next morning, Emma woke to find Alexander already up, seated in his wheelchair by the window with his laptop open, the CEO clearly back in command. He was speaking quietly on the phone, his tone authoritative yet calm as he addressed some issue with Pinnacle's operations. Emma watched him for a moment, struck by this glimpse of his professional persona. It was easy to forget sometimes that the man who looked at her with such warmth and vulnerability was also a powerful business leader who commanded thousands of employees and made decisions involving millions of dollars. He ended the call and turned to find her awake. "Morning," he said, his serious expression melting into a smile. "Sorry about that. Crisis at the Miami terminal." "Is everything okay?" Emma asked, sitting up and pulling the sheet around her. "Nothing that can't be fixed with money and apologies," he replied, wheeling over to the bed. "Though it means I need to fly down there today." Emma tried to hide her disappointment. "How long will you be gone?" 2 days, maybe 3, Alexander said, reaching for her hand. "Come with me." The spontaneous invitation caught Emma off guard. "I can't just leave. I have work, meetings." "Call in sick," he suggested, eyes twinkling. "Or work remotely. Pinnacle has excellent Wi-Fi on all our flights." Emma laughed at his persistence. "Alexander, some of us don't have the luxury of rearranging our schedules on a whim." His expression sobered slightly. "I know. I'm being selfish." He kissed her hand. "I just hate the thought of leaving you, especially after last night." The sincerity in his voice tugged at Emma's heart. "I'll miss you too," she admitted, "but it's only a few days." After Alexander left for Miami, Emma returned to her normal routine, though it now felt somehow dimmer without his presence. They texted constantly, and he called every night, but Emma found herself increasingly distracted at work, counting the hours until his return. "Earth to Emma," Diane's voice snapped her out of her reverie during an afternoon meeting. "Did you hear anything I just said?" "Sorry," Emma mumbled, embarrassed to be caught daydreaming. "Could you repeat that?" Diane's expression was knowing. "The Verdant campaign? We need the revised social media calendar by tomorrow." She paused, studying Emma closely. Everything okay with you lately? You seem elsewhere. Everything's fine, Emma insisted, hoping her cheeks weren't as red as they felt. Just a little tired. After the meeting, Diane beckoned Emma into her office, closing the door behind them. Sit, she instructed, taking her own seat behind the desk. Emma, you're one of my best people, but the past few weeks you've been distracted, checking your phone constantly, missing details you never would have before. Emma swallowed hard. I'm sorry. It won't happen again. This is about a man, isn't it? Diane asked bluntly. The one who sent the flowers. Caught off guard by Diane's directness, Emma nodded reluctantly. Is it serious? Emma hesitated, then nodded again. I think it might be. Diane leaned back in her chair, her expression softening slightly. Look, I'm not going to lecture you on work-life balance. Lord knows I'm the last person qualified to give that speech. But I do need you focused when you're here. I understand, Emma said, properly chastened. Good. Diane paused, seeming to debate whether to continue. Just be careful, Emma. I've seen talented women sideline their ambitions for relationships before. Don't let your own dreams take a back seat to his. The warning lingered in Emma's mind as she worked late that evening, trying to make up for her distraction. Was she allowing her relationship with Alexander to overshadow her professional goals? The thought was unsettling. When Alexander called that night, Emma was still at the office, surrounded by printouts for the Verdant campaign. You're working late, he observed, concern in his voice. Everything okay? Just catching up, Emma replied, not wanting to admit that her feelings for him had been affecting her performance. How's Miami? Hot, hectic. He sighed. The problem's bigger than we thought. I might need to stay through the weekend. Emma's disappointment must have transmitted through the silence because Alexander quickly added, or you could fly down on Friday. We could have a weekend in South Beach. The offer was tempting, but Diane's warning echoed in Emma's mind. I can't, she said reluctantly. We have a major presentation on Monday that I need to prepare for. I understand, Alexander said, though Emma detected a note of frustration in his voice. It's just, I miss you, more than makes sense for the short time we've known each other. I miss you too, Emma admitted softly. After they hung up, Emma stared at her reflection in the darkened office window. The woman looking back at her seemed different somehow, her eyes brighter, her expression softer. She was falling in love with Alexander Harrington, and the realization both thrilled and terrified her. When Alexander finally returned from Miami, their reunion was passionate, both of them having felt the separation more keenly than either had expected. They spent the entire weekend together, barely leaving his apartment except for a brief dinner at their favorite Italian restaurant, where Marco fussed over them like a proud father. It was Sunday evening when the subject of their relationship status arose. My mother called today, Alexander mentioned as they lounged on his sofa, Emma's feet in his lap as he massaged them absently. She wants to know why I haven't introduced you yet. Emma looked up from her book, surprised. You've told your mother about me? Of course, he replied as if it were the most natural thing in the world. I tell her everything important. And I'm important? Emma asked, the question more vulnerable than she'd intended. Alexander gave her a look of fond exasperation. Emma, I'm in love with you. Of course you're important. The declaration, spoken so casually yet with such certainty, made Emma's heart stutter. Alexander had been open about his growing feelings, but this was the first time he'd used those specific words. You don't have to say anything back, he added quickly, noticing her stunned expression. I just want you to know where I stand. Emma set her book aside, moving to kneel beside him on the sofa. Alexander, she said softly, placing her hands on either side of his face. I love you too. The words felt both terrifying and completely right as they left her lips. Alexander's expression transformed, joy lighting his features as he pulled her into a kiss that conveyed everything words couldn't: passion, tenderness, and the promise of a future neither of them had anticipated. Later, as they lay in bed watching the fog roll in over the city, Alexander traced lazy circles on her bare shoulder. "So will you meet my mother?" he asked, his tone light but with an undercurrent of significance that wasn't lost on Emma. "I'd like that," she replied, surprising herself with how much she meant it. Alexander smiled, pressing a kiss to her forehead. "Good. Because I have a feeling she's going to love you almost as much as I do." In that moment, wrapped in Alexander's arms with the city spread out beneath them, Emma allowed herself to believe that perhaps their worlds weren't so incompatible after all, that despite the differences in their circumstances, what they were building together might actually last. Little did she know that the real challenges to their relationship were only just beginning. Meeting Alexander's mother meant flying to Connecticut on his private jet, a detail that highlighted the vast differences in their worlds more starkly than anything had before. As Emma settled into a buttery leather seat, accepting a glass of champagne from the attendant, she felt a flutter of anxiety that had nothing to do with her fear of flying commercial. "You look worried," Alexander observed, reaching across to take her hand. "My mother doesn't bite, I promise." Emma attempted a smile. "It's not that. It's just all of this." She gestured at their luxurious surroundings. "Sometimes I forget who you are until moments like this." Alexander's expression softened. "I'm the same person whether I'm in a private jet or a wheelchair-accessible taxi, Emma." "I know," she assured him, squeezing his hand. "But your mother might be expecting someone different, someone more suited to this world." "My mother wants me to be happy," Alexander said with quiet confidence. "And you make me happier than I've been in years. That's all that matters to her." Emma wished she could share his certainty. The entire situation felt like something from a film. The marketing manager from a modest background flying to meet the aristocratic mother of her billionaire boyfriend. It was enough to make anyone nervous. The Harrington estate in Greenwich, Connecticut was exactly as imposing as Emma had feared. A sprawling colonial mansion set on meticulously landscaped grounds, with an entrance gate that required a security code and intercom confirmation before swinging open. "You grew up here?" Emma asked, her voice small as their car rolled up the tree-lined driveway. Alexander nodded, a hint of embarrassment crossing his features. "It's excessive, I know. My father came from old money, and appearances mattered a great deal to him." "And to your mother?" Alexander considered the question. "Less so, especially after my father passed. But she's lived this way her entire adult life. It's what she knows." Eleanor Harrington was waiting for them on the wide front porch, a slender woman in her 60s with Alexander's gray eyes and an elegant posture that spoke of a lifetime of privilege and poise. Despite Emma's nerves, Mrs. Harrington greeted her warmly, taking both her hands and studying her with undisguised curiosity. "So you're the woman who's captured my son's heart," she said, her cultured voice carrying just a hint of New England accent. "Alexander speaks of little else these days." "Mother," Alexander protested mildly, smiling as he maneuvered his wheelchair up the porch ramp that had clearly been installed for his visits. "It's lovely to meet you, Mrs. Harrington," Emma replied, grateful that her voice remained steady. "Your home is beautiful." "Thank you, dear, and please call me Eleanor." As they moved inside, Emma was struck by the understated opulence of the Harrington home. Antique furniture that probably belonged in museums, original artwork on the walls, crystal chandeliers casting warm light over marble floors. All of it spoke of generations of wealth and taste. Emma, in her simple sundress from a mid-range department store, felt woefully out of place. Yet as the day progressed, Eleanor Harrington proved to be a gracious hostess who seemed genuinely interested in getting to know Emma. Over lunch in a sunroom overlooking the gardens, she asked thoughtful questions about Emma's work, her background, her aspirations, listening with apparent interest to her answers. "Marketing is such a creative field," Eleanor remarked. "Alexander tells me you hope to start your own agency someday." Emma nodded, surprised and touched that Alexander had shared that detail with his mother. "That's the dream. I'm still gaining experience and building connections, but eventually, yes. Ambition is an admirable quality," Eleanor said approvingly. "I always believed in having my own pursuits, even as a wife and mother. I taught art history at Yale for 20 years while raising Alexander." This glimpse of Eleanor as more than just the wealthy widow of a business magnate helped Emma relax slightly. There was substance beneath the polished exterior, a woman who had maintained her own identity despite the privileges and constraints of her position. After lunch, Alexander suggested a tour of the grounds. The estate had been modified extensively to accommodate his wheelchair, with smooth pathways winding through the gardens and ramps discreetly integrated into the landscape design. "My mother had all of this done after my accident," Alexander explained as they paused beside a small pond where koi swam lazily beneath lily pads. "She wanted me to feel welcome here, to know this was still my home." "She loves you very much," Emma observed, watching Eleanor in the distance as she directed a gardener about some roses. "She does," Alexander agreed, "though sometimes that love can be protective. She worried I'd never find someone who could see past the chair, past the money, someone who'd love me for myself." He turned to look at Emma, his expression earnest. "Until you." Emma's heart swelled with emotion. "Alexander." He took her hand, bringing it to his lips. "Thank you for coming here, for making this effort. It means everything to me that the two most important women in my life are getting to know each other." The weekend passed pleasantly, with formal dinners where Emma learned to navigate multiple forks and unfamiliar dishes, afternoon tea in the garden, and evenings in the library where Eleanor showed her family photo albums featuring a young Alexander, athletic, mischievous, and always smiling. "He was fearless," Eleanor remarked, pointing to a photo of teenage Alexander climbing a rocky cliff. "Too fearless, perhaps." A shadow crossed her face, and Emma knew she was thinking of the accident that had changed everything. "He still is," Emma said softly. "Just in different ways now." Eleanor's gaze sharpened, studying Emma with new appreciation. "Yes," she agreed. "You do understand him, don't you?" On their last evening, after Alexander had retired early with a headache, Emma found herself alone with Eleanor in the library. The older woman poured them both a small glass of sherry, then settled into an armchair across from Emma. "I've enjoyed getting to know you this weekend, Emma," she began, her tone warm but serious. "I can see why Alexander is so taken with you. You're intelligent, kind, and you clearly care for him deeply." "I love him," Emma said simply. Eleanor nodded, swirling the amber liquid in her glass. "Love is essential, but sometimes not sufficient on its own. Alexander's life is complicated. The demands on him, the scrutiny, the expectations, it's a lot for anyone to take on, especially someone not born to this world." Emma tensed slightly. "You think I'm not right for him because I didn't grow up with wealth?" "Not at all," Eleanor corrected gently. "I think you might be exactly what Alexander needs. I just want you to understand what you're stepping into. A life very different from your own, with challenges you may not have anticipated." "I'm aware of the differences between us," Emma said, careful to keep her tone respectful, "but they don't seem to matter when we're together." Eleanor smiled, though her eyes remained serious. "They may not matter to you now, in this honeymoon phase of your relationship, but eventually they could. Alexander's position means constant travel, public scrutiny, social obligations. Your own career ambitions might become difficult to pursue alongside the demands of being with him." Emma wanted to protest, to insist that she and Alexander could navigate these challenges together, but Eleanor's words had struck a nerve. She'd already noticed how her work had suffered when she was distracted by thoughts of Alexander. how his spontaneous invitations sometimes clashed with her professional responsibilities. "I'm not trying to discourage you," Eleanor continued, seeing Emma's troubled expression. "I just want you both to go into this with your eyes open. My son has had enough disappointment in his life, and you, my dear, deserve to live your own dreams, not just become an accessory to his." Later that night, lying beside Alexander in the massive four-poster bed of his childhood bedroom, Emma found herself turning Eleanor's words over in her mind. She watched the moonlight play across Alexander's sleeping face, her heart full of love for this complex, remarkable man who had entered her life so unexpectedly. But for the first time, she also felt a flicker of doubt about their future, not about her feelings for him, but about whether their vastly different worlds could truly merge without one of them having to sacrifice essential parts of themselves. Back in San Francisco, Emma threw herself into her work with renewed dedication, determined to prove to herself and to Diane that she could balance her relationship with her professional ambitions. The Verdant campaign was gaining momentum, with engagement metrics exceeding expectations and the client expressing interest in expanding their budget for the next quarter. "You've turned things around," Diane observed during their weekly check-in. "The focus is back. The creativity is on point. Whatever was distracting you, it seems you've got it under control." Emma smiled, accepting the rare compliment. "Thank you. I've been working on finding better balance." What she didn't mention was the toll that better balance was taking on her relationship with Alexander. They were seeing each other less frequently now, perhaps 2 or 3 evenings a week instead of nearly every day. Alexander had noticed the shift, though he'd been supportive of her dedication to her career, never complaining when she needed to cut their evenings short or work through weekends. But Emma sensed his disappointment, saw it in the way his eyes followed her when she left his apartment to return to her own work, heard it in the wistful tone when he suggested trips she had to decline. One evening, about a month after their Connecticut visit, Alexander invited Emma to dinner at his penthouse. When she arrived, she found the place transformed, dozens of candles casting a golden glow, the dining table set elegantly with fine china and crystal, and Alexander waiting for her with an uncharacteristically nervous expression. "What's all this?" Emma asked, taking in the romantic scene. Alexander wheeled forward to take her hands. "I wanted tonight to be special." Something in his tone made Emma's pulse quicken. "Alexander, I have something important to ask you," he said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small velvet box. "Emma, these past few months have been the happiest of my life. You've shown me a kind of love I never thought I'd find. One based on who I truly am, not what I have or what I can offer." Emma's breath caught as he opened the box, revealing a stunning diamond ring that sparkled in the candlelight. It was beautiful, but tasteful, not the ostentatious display of wealth she might have expected. "I know it might seem soon," Alexander continued, his gray eyes earnest, "but when you know, you know. And I know that I want to spend my life with you. Emma Carter, will you marry me?" Time seemed to stop as Emma stared at the ring, then at Alexander's hopeful face. Her heart was racing, emotions washing over her in conflicting waves, love, excitement, but also fear and uncertainty. "Alexander, she began, her voice trembling. The ring glittered between them, beautiful and terrifying in its implications, a symbol not just of their love, but of a life Emma wasn't sure she was ready to embrace. "I can't," Emma whispered, the words escaping before she could fully process them. "Not yet." Alexander's face fell, though he quickly tried to mask his disappointment. "I see," he said softly, closing the ring box with a gentle snap that somehow sounded deafening in the candle-lit silence. Emma reached for his hand, desperate to explain. "Alexander, I love you. So much. But this is so fast, and there's so much we haven't figured out yet." "What's to figure out?" he asked, his voice carefully controlled. "We love each other, Everything else is just details. But they're important details, Emma insisted. Our lives are so different. I'm still trying to establish my career, to find my path. And you live in a world I'm only beginning to understand. Alexander's expression hardened slightly. Is this about the money? Because if you're worried about what people will say, it's not about what people will say, Emma interrupted. It's about who I am, who I want to become. I'm afraid of losing myself in your world, of becoming just Alexander Harrington's wife instead of Emma Carter. The hurt in Alexander's eyes made Emma's chest ache. She hadn't meant to wound him, but she couldn't accept his proposal without being honest about her fears. I thought you knew me better than that, he said quietly. I would never want to diminish who you are. I love you precisely because you're Emma Carter. Passionate, determined, brilliantly yourself. I know that, Emma assured him, moving to kneel beside his wheelchair so they were eye to eye. But marriage changes things. It would mean stepping into your public life, attending functions as your wife, being scrutinized by the press. Your business associates would see me differently. My colleagues would treat me differently. Alexander was silent for a long moment, his gray eyes searching hers. So what are you saying? That you can never see yourself marrying me? No! Emma's response was immediate and emphatic. I'm saying not yet. I need time, Alexander. Time to grow more secure in my career, to learn to navigate your world without losing my footing. Can you understand that? Alexander took a deep breath, then nodded slowly. I don't like it, he admitted with a hint of his usual directness. But I do understand, and I'd rather wait than lose you. He took her hands, drawing her closer. Keep the ring, he said, pressing the velvet box into her palm. Not as an obligation, but as a promise. When you're ready, if you're ever ready, it's yours. Tears welled in Emma's eyes at the gesture, so gracious, so quintessentially Alexander in its combination of understanding and determination. I do love you, she whispered, leaning forward to kiss him. I know, he replied, his hands coming up to cradle her face. And I'll wait for as long as it takes. The rejected proposal hung between them in the weeks that followed, not as an open wound, but as a bruise that remained tender to the touch. They never discussed it directly, but Emma felt its presence in the slight hesitation before Alexander suggested future plans. In the careful way he avoided any mention of their long-term future together. On the surface, their relationship continued much as before. They spent time together when their schedules allowed, talked daily when apart, and maintained the physical and emotional intimacy they'd established. But something had shifted, a subtle change in the atmosphere that Emma couldn't quite define but felt acutely nonetheless. Alexander, true to his word, never pressured her about the proposal. The ring box remained in Emma's bedside drawer, unopened but impossible to forget. Sometimes late at night, she would take it out and look at it, trying to imagine herself wearing it, trying to picture a future where she could confidently step into Alexander's world without losing herself in the process. 6 weeks after the proposal, an opportunity arose that thrust their relationship issues into sharper relief. Diane called Emma into her office on a Wednesday afternoon, her expression uncharacteristically excited. I've got news, she announced without preamble. The London office needs someone to head up their digital marketing division for the next 6 months. It's a significant promotion with the possibility of a permanent position if things go well. Emma stared at her, processing the implications. And you're considering me for this? Not considering, offering, Diane clarified. Your work on the Verdant campaign impressed the executive team. They want someone with fresh ideas, someone who can revitalize their digital strategy. She leaned forward. This could be a career-defining opportunity, Emma. Emma's mind raced. London, 6 months, possibly longer. Away from Alexander, but immersed in exactly the kind of high-level marketing work she'd always dreamed of. The timing couldn't have been more pointed if the universe had planned it specifically to test her. "When would I need to decide?" she asked, her voice steady despite the turmoil inside. "By Monday," Diane replied. "They need someone in London by the end of the month." Emma spent the rest of the day in a fog, automatically completing her tasks while her mind wrestled with the choice before her. When she arrived at Alexander's penthouse that evening, she was still no closer to a decision. He noticed immediately that something was wrong. "What is it?" he asked, as she picked at her dinner, barely tasting the gourmet meal his chef had prepared. Emma set down her fork. "I've been offered a position in London, a significant promotion, heading up digital marketing for the European division." Alexander's expression remained carefully neutral. "That sounds like an incredible opportunity." "It is," Emma agreed. "It's exactly the kind of experience I'd need to eventually launch my own agency. But it's 6 months, possibly longer." "I see." Alexander was quiet for a moment, swirling the wine in his glass. "And you're considering taking it?" "I don't know," Emma admitted. "Part of me feels like I have to. It's the chance I've been working toward for years. But another part is thinking about us," Alexander finished for her. Emma nodded, meeting his gaze directly. Long distance for 6 months would be hard on any relationship, let alone one that's still relatively new. Alexander set down his wine glass, his expression thoughtful. "You know, Pinnacle has a major hub in London. I'm there at least once a month for board meetings." "So you'd visit," Emma said, recognizing the attempt at compromise. "More than that," Alexander continued. "I could work from there more frequently. My executive team handles most day-to-day operations anyway. With video conferencing and my London offices, I could probably split my time between there and San Francisco without much disruption." The offer touched Emma deeply. That Alexander would reorganize his life to accommodate her career ambitions spoke volumes about his love and support. Yet something in his suggestion also troubled her. "You'd do that for me?" she asked quietly. "Of course," he replied without hesitation. "I love you, Emma. I want this relationship to work, which means supporting your dreams as much as my own." Emma reached across the table to take his hand. "That means more to me than I can say. But Alexander, I think I need to do this on my own." His expression faltered slightly. "What do you mean?" "If I go to London," Emma explained carefully, "I need to establish myself there independently, to prove to myself that I can succeed on my own merits, not because my boyfriend is a powerful CEO who rearranged his schedule to be with me." Alexander withdrew his hand slowly. "I see," he said, his tone neutral in a way that suggested he was masking hurt. "So you're saying if you take this position you don't want me to visit?" "Not exactly," Emma said, struggling to articulate her complicated feelings. "I'm saying I need space to establish my professional identity there. Of course I'd want to see you, but not with you hovering nearby as a safety net." "I wasn't offering to hover," Alexander replied, a defensive edge creeping into his voice. "I was trying to find a way to support your career while preserving our relationship." "I know that," Emma assured him, "and I appreciate it more than you know, but I'm still trying to figure out how to be with you without being overshadowed by you. Taking this job might help me find that balance." Alexander was quiet for a long moment. "So you're going to accept the position?" he finally said. It wasn't a question. "I think I have to," Emma replied softly. "I would regret it forever if I didn't, and eventually I might resent you for being the reason I stayed." "And us?" Alexander asked, his voice carefully controlled. "What happens to us while you're finding yourself in London?" The hint of bitterness in his tone wasn't lost on Emma. "We take it one day at a time," she suggested. "We talk, we visit when possible, we see where things stand after 6 months." Alexander nodded slowly, though his expression remained troubled. "If that's what you need, Emma, then I support your decision." They finished dinner in silence, the usual warmth between them chilled by the weight of unspoken words. Later, as they lay in bed with a careful distance separating them, Emma stared at the ceiling, wondering if she was making the right choice or if she was sacrificing something precious for the sake of her pride and independence. The days that followed were tense as Emma prepared for her departure. She accepted the London position, began the process of subletting her apartment, and spent hours on the phone with Mia discussing the logistics of cat-sitting for Fitzgerald. Alexander remained supportive on the surface, but Emma sensed his withdrawal, a subtle but unmistakable pulling back of the emotional intimacy they'd shared. They still saw each other, still made love, still exchanged the expected words of affection, but something vital had gone missing, a spark of joy, of unguarded connection. The night before her flight to London, Emma stayed at Alexander's penthouse. They'd made a valiant attempt at a romantic farewell dinner, but conversation had been strained, punctuated by long silences and careful navigation around difficult topics. As they prepared for bed, Alexander watched Emma from the doorway of the bathroom, his expression unreadable. "Do you remember the first time we met?" he asked suddenly. Emma paused in the act of removing her makeup. "Of course. O'Hare Airport. You dropped your papers. I missed my flight." "I knew that day," he said quietly. "Even before I knew your name, I had this feeling that you were going to matter to me." Emma's heart twisted painfully. "Alexander." He moved closer, reaching for her hand. "I'm not trying to make this harder. I just want you to know that no matter what happens in London, no matter where your career takes you, that feeling hasn't changed for me. You matter, Emma, more than anyone ever has." Tears welled in Emma's eyes as she stepped into his embrace. "I love you," she whispered against his shoulder. "That's not going to change because of an ocean between us." "I hope not," Alexander murmured, his arms tightening around her. "Because I don't think I could bear losing you twice." The words lingered in Emma's mind the next morning as their car approached the international terminal. Alexander had insisted on accompanying her to the airport, though they both knew it would make the farewell more difficult. As they reached the security checkpoint, the final barrier beyond which he couldn't follow, Emma turned to face him. "This isn't goodbye," she said firmly. "It's just, see you soon." Alexander nodded, his gray eyes suspiciously bright. "Go be brilliant, Emma Carter. Show London what you're made of." He pulled her close for one last kiss, tender, lingering, and tinged with a desperation that spoke of his fear that this parting might prove permanent. As Emma walked through security without looking back, the weight of the unopened ring box in her carry-on seemed to grow heavier with each step toward her uncertain future. London embraced Emma with rain-slicked streets and the promise of reinvention. The European headquarters of Marston Media occupied 3 floors of a sleek building in Canary Wharf, with views of the Thames that reminded her of San Francisco Bay, similar yet profoundly different, much like her new life compared to the one she'd left behind. Her first weeks passed in a blur of introductions, meetings, and late nights as she familiarized herself with the European team and their clients. The work was challenging and exhilarating, exactly what she'd hoped for when she accepted the position. Unlike in San Francisco, where she'd been one of many account managers, here she was Director of Digital Strategy with a team of 15 reporting directly to her. "Impressive presentation today," remarked James Whitley, the UK Managing Director, after Emma had outlined her vision for revamping a major client's social media presence. "The New York office warned me you were talented, but they undersold you." Emma smiled, accepting the compliment with a confidence she was still growing into. "Thank you. I'm excited to implement these strategies across our European accounts." "As you should be," James agreed, his British accent lending gravity to his words. "Your predecessor was competent but uninspired. We needed someone willing to take risks, and you're certainly delivering on that front." The praise was gratifying, validating Emma's decision to accept the position. Yet as she returned to her temporary apartment that evening, a company-leased flat in a modern building near the office, The satisfaction of professional recognition was tempered by a deeper loneliness that no amount of success could fill. She checked her phone, calculating the time difference yet again. Mid-morning in San Francisco. Alexander would be in meetings, unlikely to respond immediately to a text. They'd established a routine of sorts: daily messages, video calls 3 times a week, detailed emails catching each other up on their lives. But the 8-hour time difference made spontaneous communication nearly impossible, and Emma felt the distance between them growing with each passing day. When they did speak, Alexander was unfailingly supportive of her work in London, asking thoughtful questions about her projects and celebrating her successes. But there was a guardedness to their conversations now, a careful avoidance of deeper emotional territory. Neither mentioned the proposal or the ring that still sat unopened in Emma's bedside drawer, transported across an ocean, but no closer to being worn. 3 weeks into her London assignment, Emma was working late when her phone lit up with Alexander's name, an unexpected call outside their scheduled time. "Alexander? Is everything okay?" she answered, concern immediately rising. "Everything's fine," he assured her, his voice warm through the connection. "I just wanted to hear your voice. Is this a bad time?" Emma glanced at her computer screen, at the half-finished presentation she'd been struggling with for hours. "No, it's perfect timing. I needed a break." "How's the Watson campaign coming along?" he asked, reminding her that he paid careful attention to the details she shared about her work. "Challenging," Emma admitted. "The European market is more fragmented than I anticipated. Strategies that worked brilliantly in the US are falling flat here. That's what makes it interesting, though, isn't it? Finding new approaches for different cultures?" Emma smiled, recognizing the subtle reminder of why she'd wanted this opportunity in the first place. "You're right. It's frustrating, but also exactly what I came here for. To grow, to be challenged." They talked for nearly an hour, the conversation flowing more easily than it had in weeks. Alexander told her about Pinnacle's new sustainability initiative, about Fitzgerald, who was apparently thriving under Mia's care, about a new accessible sailing program he was supporting through his foundation. As they were about to hang up, Alexander's tone shifted, becoming more serious. "I miss you, Emma. More than I expected to, and I expected it to be pretty bad." The simple honesty of his statement made Emma's chest tighten. "I miss you too," she replied softly. "Sometimes I'll turn to tell you something and remember you're not here. It's like missing a limb." "I could visit," Alexander suggested, "not for the first time. Just for a weekend. No hovering, I promise." Emma hesitated. They'd discussed this before her departure, agreed to give each other space for the first month at least. But now, lonely in a foreign city and missing his physical presence with an intensity that surprised her, the idea of seeing him was powerfully tempting. "I'd like that," she said finally. "Maybe in a couple of weeks. I have a major presentation on the 15th, but after that, the 17th through 20th, Alexander suggested immediately, as if he'd already checked his calendar in anticipation of her agreement. "I could fly in Friday morning, leave Monday." "Perfect," Emma agreed, a weight lifting from her chest at the prospect of seeing him. "I can show you my London, well, what little of it I've managed to explore between work sessions." After they hung up, Emma returned to her presentation with renewed energy, the promise of Alexander's visit like a beacon illuminating the weeks of solitary work ahead. The London rain was relentless the morning Alexander's plane landed at Heathrow. Emma waited anxiously in the arrivals area, scanning the crowd for his familiar face. When he finally appeared, maneuvering his wheelchair through the throng of travelers, Emma's heart leapt. He spotted her at the same moment, his serious expression transforming into a smile that made her breath catch. They reached each other simultaneously, Emma kneeling to embrace him, breathing in his familiar scent, feeling the solid reality of him after weeks of digital connection. "You're here," she whispered, suddenly fighting tears. "You're really here." Alexander's arms tightened around her. "Wild horses couldn't have kept me away." The weekend unfolded like a dream. Emma showing Alexander her favorite discoveries in the city, from a tiny bakery near her flat that made pastries rivaling any in San Francisco to the surprisingly accessible paths of Regent's Park. They attended a West End show, dined at a restaurant with a Michelin star that Alexander somehow secured reservations for despite its 6-month waiting list, and spent long hours simply being together in Emma's temporary home, rediscovering the physical connection that had been absent from their relationship. On Sunday evening, their last night before Alexander's departure, they lay tangled together in Emma's bed, reluctant to sleep away their final hours. "Come back with me," Alexander said suddenly, propping himself up on one elbow to look into her eyes. "Just for a visit, a long weekend. You must have vacation time." Emma smiled sadly, tracing the line of his jaw with her fingertips. "I can't yet. We're in the middle of launching 3 major campaigns. Maybe next month." Alexander caught her hand, pressing a kiss to her palm. "I hate this," he admitted, "being apart. Video calls and texts aren't enough, Emma. This weekend has only made that clearer." "I know," she whispered, "but it's only for a few more months, once the initial phase of the Watson campaign is complete." "And then what?" Alexander interrupted, a hint of frustration breaking through his usual composure. "You come back to San Francisco? Or do you extend your stay here? Or move on to another opportunity in another city?" The questions hung between them, exposing the uncertainty that had been lurking beneath the surface of their reunion. Emma sat up, pulling the sheet around her, suddenly feeling vulnerable. "I don't know yet," she admitted. "James has hinted that they'd like me to stay on permanently, and the work is incredible, Alexander. I'm doing things here I wouldn't have had the opportunity to do for years in San Francisco." Alexander was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes troubled. "I understand that," he said finally. "I'd never ask you to give up something that fulfills you professionally. But I need to know if there's still a place for us in your future plans, Emma. Because right now it feels like I'm the only one trying to figure out how we can make this work long-term." The accusation stung, partially because Emma recognized the truth in it. She had been avoiding thinking too concretely about their future, focusing instead on the immediate challenges of her new position. "That's not fair," she protested. "I'm not the one who pushed for a commitment before I was ready. I'm trying to build a career, to find my own path." "And I support that," Alexander cut in. "But at some point, we need to have a real conversation about where this relationship is going. I can't live in limbo indefinitely, Emma." The tension between them was palpable, a string pulled too tight and threatening to snap. Emma took a deep breath, trying to calm the storm of emotions his words had provoked. "You're right," she conceded. "We do need to talk about it. But not now. Not with you leaving tomorrow and both of us emotional about being apart again." Alexander studied her face for a long moment before nodding reluctantly. "Okay, but soon, Emma, because as much as I love you, I need more than stolen weekends and video calls to sustain me." The next morning at Heathrow was a somber echo of their joyful reunion 3 days earlier. They clung to each other at the security checkpoint, neither wanting to be the first to let go. "I'll call when I land," Alexander promised, his voice rough with emotion. "I'll be waiting," Emma replied, forcing a smile that felt brittle on her face. As she watched him navigate security and disappear into the departures area, Emma felt a hollowness in her chest that hadn't been there before his visit. Seeing him, being with him physically had reopened a wound that distance had begun to numb. She wondered, not for the first time, if she'd made the right choice in coming to London, in prioritizing her professional growth over the relationship that had come to mean so much to her. The weeks following Alexander's visit were some of the most challenging of Emma's time in London. Work intensified as the Watson campaign approached its launch date, requiring late nights and weekends at the office. Their scheduled calls became shorter, sometimes missed entirely due to Emma's workload or the inconvenient time difference. When they did speak, a new tension underlaid their conversations. Alexander's increasing frustration with their separation, Emma's guilt and confusion about her divided priorities. 2 months into her London assignment, Emma was working late again when James Whitley stopped by her office. "Still here at 9? Your American work ethic is putting us Brits to shame," he joked, leaning against her doorframe. Emma smiled tiredly. "Just trying to stay ahead of the Watson rollout. Did you need something?" "Actually, yes," James said, his expression turning more serious as he entered and took a seat across from her desk. "I wanted to discuss your future with Marston Media." Emma's pulse quickened. "My future?" "The executive team is impressed with your work here, Emma. The Watson campaign is already being called innovative by industry insiders, and the numbers from the soft launch are exceeding expectations." He paused, studying her reaction. "We'd like to offer you a permanent position as Executive Director of European Digital Operations." The offer was more than Emma had dared hope for. A significant promotion with expanded responsibilities and, she suspected, a substantial salary increase. It was exactly the kind of opportunity that could accelerate her career trajectory, potentially positioning her to start her own agency in just a few years. "That's incredible," she managed, her mind racing with the implications. "Take some time to think about it," James advised. "It would mean relocating to London permanently, of course. We'd assist with visa issues, housing, the whole package." He stood, giving her a knowing look. "I'm aware there might be personal considerations involved in your decision. Just let me know by the end of the month." After he left, Emma sat motionless at her desk, staring unseeing at her computer screen. The professional opportunity of a lifetime was within her grasp, but accepting it would mean making London her home, potentially ending any realistic hope for a future with Alexander. As if summoned by her thoughts, her phone lit up with his name. Emma stared at it for a long moment before answering, unsure how to share news that could either solidify their relationship or destroy it entirely. "Emma? Are you there?" Alexander's voice came through the phone, pulling her back to the present moment. "I'm here," she replied, struggling to sound normal. "Just finishing up some work." "You sound strange. Is everything okay?" Emma hesitated, torn between sharing her news immediately and taking time to process it herself first. "It's been a long day," she said finally. "How are you?" Alexander seemed to accept her deflection, launching into an update about Pinnacle's latest quarterly results and an upcoming trip to Tokyo. Emma listened with half an attention, her mind still reeling from James's offer. "Emma, you're not really listening," Alexander observed after a few minutes. "What's going on?" She took a deep breath. "James just offered me a permanent position here," she said, the words tumbling out. "Executive Director of European Digital Operations." There was a long silence on the other end of the line. "I see," Alexander said finally, his tone carefully neutral. "That's quite an opportunity." "It is," Emma agreed, waiting for him to say more. "And what did you tell him?" "That I need time to think about it." Emma began gathering her things, suddenly desperate to leave the office, to be somewhere private for this conversation. "He gave me until the end of the month to decide." "I see," Alexander repeated. Another pause. "And are you considering it?" Emma closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the question. "I don't know yet. It's a significant promotion, Alexander, the kind of role that could set me up to start my own agency in a few years." "In London," he said, the implication clear. "Presumably, yes." Emma left her office, walking quickly toward the elevator. "But I just found out about it. I haven't had time to think through all the implications." "Including what it means for us?" Alexander said, a hint of bitterness creeping into his voice. "Yes, including that," Emma acknowledged, stepping into the empty elevator. "Alexander, can we talk about this tomorrow, when I've had some time to process it?" He sighed, the sound heavy with resignation. "Of course. Call me when you're ready." They said goodbye, the conversation ending with none of their usual warmth or affection. As Emma walked back to her flat through the drizzling London evening, She felt the weight of the decision before her pressing down like the gray sky overhead. The next day, Emma called in sick for the first time since arriving in London. She needed space to think, away from the office where James's offer hung in the air like an expectant promise. Instead, she wandered the city, finding herself eventually in the British Museum, surrounded by artifacts that had survived centuries of human drama, making her own problems seem momentarily insignificant. Sitting on a bench before a display of ancient Greek sculptures, Emma finally allowed herself to examine her feelings without distraction. The professional opportunity was remarkable, a dramatic acceleration of her career timeline, recognition of her talents, and the kind of international experience that would make her exceptionally valuable in the marketing world. But accepting meant committing to London for at least several years. It meant turning a temporary separation from Alexander into a permanent geographical reality. Could their relationship survive that? Should she even ask him to try? Emma pulled out her phone, opening the photo album she'd created of their weekend together in London. Alexander smiling as they picnicked in Regent's Park, his expression softened by the dappled sunlight filtering through the trees. The two of them reflected in a restaurant window, heads inclined toward each other, so clearly connected despite the chaos of the city around them. She loved him, that much was certain. The question was whether love was enough to justify turning down a career-defining opportunity, or whether pursuing that opportunity meant accepting the probable end of their relationship. That evening, Emma finally called Alexander. She'd spent hours composing a speech in her head, trying to articulate her conflicted feelings. But when he answered, all her carefully prepared words dissolved. "I don't know what to do," she said simply, her voice catching. Alexander's tone softened immediately. "Tell me what you're thinking, Emma. All of it." So she did, pouring out her confusion, her ambition, her fear of making the wrong choice and regretting it forever. She told him about wandering the museum, about the way work fulfilled her, about how much she missed him despite her success in London. "I feel like I'm being asked to choose between two parts of myself," she concluded, tears streaming down her face. "The part that loves you and the part that needs to prove I can succeed on my own terms." "Why does it have to be a choice?" Alexander asked after a long moment. "Why can't you have both?" "How?" Emma asked, wiping her tears. "You're in San Francisco. Your life, your company, everything is there, and this opportunity is here in London. Pinnacle has offices around the world, Emma, including London. You'd move to London?" The possibility hadn't seriously occurred to her. "If that's what it takes to be with you, yes," Alexander replied without hesitation. "I already spend a significant amount of time in Europe for business. Making London my primary base would require adjustments, but it's not impossible." Emma's mind raced. "But your life in San Francisco, your home, your medical team, all of that can be replicated here," Alexander assured her. "What can't be replaced is you, Emma. I've built my life after the accident around the idea that adaptability is strength. If being with you means adapting to a new city, that's a challenge I'm more than willing to accept." His willingness to uproot his life for her was both touching and alarming. "Alexander, I couldn't ask you to do that." "You're not asking, I'm offering," he corrected gently. "But there's another option too, one that might be better for both of us professionally." "What's that?" "A compromise. You accept the London position and we commit to a bicontinental relationship for a set period. Say, 2 years. I'll spend at least 1 week each month in London. You'll visit San Francisco when you can. At the end of the 2 years, we reevaluate. Maybe by then you'll be ready to return to the States and start your own agency. Or maybe I'll be ready to expand Pinnacle's European operations and move to London permanently." The thoughtfulness of his proposal stunned Emma. While she'd been agonizing over an either-or choice, Alexander had been crafting a solution that honored both her ambitions and their relationship. "You've given this a lot of thought," she observed. "I've had months to think about it, Alexander replied. "Ever since you left for London, I've been trying to envision a future that lets you pursue your dreams without us losing each other in the process." Emma felt a rush of love for this man who continued to surprise her with his understanding and support. "It won't be easy," she warned. "Even with regular visits, that's a lot of time apart." "Nothing worthwhile ever comes easily," Alexander said, echoing words he'd spoken about his rehabilitation after the accident. "The question is whether we believe what we have is worth fighting for." "I do," Emma said without hesitation. "I love you, Alexander." "I love you too," he replied, his voice warm through the connection. "Enough to find a way to make this work no matter what it takes." For the first time since leaving San Francisco, Emma felt the heavy weight of indecision lift from her shoulders. There was a path forward, not a perfect one, but one that allowed her to honor both her professional ambitions and her love for Alexander. The next morning, Emma asked to meet with James to discuss the offer. She found him in the company cafe reviewing documents over coffee. "Emma," he greeted her warmly, "please join me. Have you given any thought to our conversation?" "I have," she replied, taking a seat across from him. "I'd like to accept the position, but I have one condition." James raised an eyebrow. "And what might that be?" "Flexibility for transatlantic travel," Emma said. "My partner lives in San Francisco. If I'm going to commit to London long-term, I need to know I can maintain that relationship." James studied her for a moment. "The mysterious boyfriend who sends extravagant flowers," he mused. "He must be quite special if you're negotiating terms around him." "He is," Emma confirmed, not elaborating on Alexander's identity. Despite their months together, she'd been careful to keep the details of her relationship private from her colleagues. "Well, I don't see why we can't accommodate that," James said, after a brief consideration. "You've more than proven your worth to the company. Consider it part of your benefits package. Reasonable travel flexibility, provided the work doesn't suffer." "It won't," Emma promised. "Thank you." With her decision made, Emma felt a new sense of purpose in both her professional and personal life. She threw herself into her new role with renewed energy, while also making concrete plans with Alexander for their bi-continental future. 2 weeks after accepting the permanent position, Emma was working late again when her assistant knocked on her door. "There's someone here to see you," she said with a knowing smile. "Says it's urgent." Before Emma could respond, Alexander appeared behind her assistant, looking handsome in a tailored suit despite the signs of travel fatigue on his face. "Alexander!" Emma gasped, rising from her desk. "What are you doing here? I thought you were in San Francisco until next week." He wheeled into her office, dismissing her assistant with a grateful nod. "I was. But then I realized something couldn't wait." Emma rounded her desk to embrace him, breathing in his familiar scent. "What couldn't wait?" Alexander reached into his jacket pocket, pulling out a small velvet box, the same one she'd left behind in San Francisco. "This," he said simply, opening it to reveal the diamond ring. Emma's breath caught. "Alexander, before you say anything," he began, taking her hand. "This isn't me asking you to choose between your career and our relationship. I think we've established that's a false dichotomy." He looked up at her, his gray eyes sincere. "This is me asking you to marry me, Emma Carter, with the full understanding that marriage for us might look different than for other couples. It might mean maintaining homes on 2 continents for a while. It might mean frequent travel and occasional separations. But it will always mean supporting each other's dreams, respecting each other's independence, and finding our way back to each other no matter the distance." Tears welled in Emma's eyes as she knelt to be level with him. "You flew all the way to London to tell me that?" "I flew all the way to London because some things need to be said in person," Alexander replied. "Because I want you to look in my eyes and know that I mean every word. I love you, Emma. All of you. Your ambition, your independence, your heart. Will you marry me?" Emma looked at the ring, then at Alexander's face, so full of love and hope and understanding. In that moment, the fears that had held her back seemed to dissolve. She wasn't losing herself by choosing him. He was offering her the chance to be fully herself, with the added strength of his unwavering support. "Yes," she whispered, feeling a certainty she hadn't expected. "Yes, I'll marry you." Alexander's face lit up with joy as he slipped the ring onto her finger. It fit perfectly, catching the light of her office lamp and sending prisms dancing across the walls. As they kissed, Emma realized that this was what Eleanor Harrington had warned her about. Not the challenge of merging different worlds, but the far more significant challenge of finding someone who would help you be your best self within those worlds. Alexander wasn't asking her to sacrifice her dreams for his. He was offering to build new dreams together, ones that honored both their individual needs and their shared love. Outside her office window, London's lights twinkled in the early evening, a glittering promise of the future they would create. Not without difficulties, but with a commitment to face them together. 1 year later, Emma stood at the window of Alexander's penthouse, their penthouse now, watching fog roll in over San Francisco Bay. The diamond on her left hand caught the late afternoon sunlight, sending tiny rainbows dancing across the glass. Behind her, suitcases stood packed and ready for their morning flight back to London. The past year had been a whirlwind of transcontinental flights, video calls that often crossed time zones, and the unique challenges of planning a wedding between two continents. Yet somehow, they'd made it work. Their bi-continental existence had settled into a rhythm that, while unconventional, suited them both. Emma had flourished in her role at Marston Media London, building a reputation for innovative digital campaigns that had attracted industry attention. Alexander had reorganized Pinnacle's leadership structure to allow him more flexibility, spending at least 10 days each month in London while managing San Francisco operations remotely. Both maintained apartments in their respective cities, though they'd recently begun discussing a more permanent London home to replace Emma's company flat. "There you are," Alexander's voice came from behind her. He wheeled into the living room, dressed casually in jeans and a soft gray sweater that matched his eyes. "Your mother called. She's safely checked into the hotel and wants to know if we're still on for dinner." Emma turned from the window, smiling at the man who would become her husband in just 3 days. "Did you tell her yes?" "I did," Alexander confirmed. "Though I warned her we might be a bit jet-lagged. The London-San Francisco adjustment always hits you harder than me." Emma crossed the room to perch on the arm of his wheelchair, a familiar gesture that had become natural between them. "That's because you're constantly flying somewhere. Your body probably doesn't even know what time zone it belongs in anymore." Alexander laughed, wrapping an arm around her waist. "True, though after the wedding we'll have 2 whole weeks in one place. I might go into temporal shock." Their honeymoon plans involved Alexander's Island, the site of their first real date, where they could enjoy complete privacy and uninterrupted time together, a luxury their busy schedules rarely allowed. "Speaking of the wedding," Emma said, "Mia texted that the final dress fitting went perfectly. No last-minute alterations needed." "Excellent news," Alexander replied. "One less thing to worry about." The decision to marry in San Francisco had been pragmatic. Alexander's mother's health had been declining, making travel difficult for her, and many of their closest friends were based in the city. But they'd compromised by planning a second, smaller celebration in London for Emma's colleagues and the friends she'd made there. As evening approached, they headed to the upscale restaurant where they were meeting Emma's mother, who had flown in from her retirement community in Arizona for the wedding. Catherine Carter was waiting for them at the table, her face lighting up when she spotted them. "There's my beautiful daughter," she exclaimed, rising to embrace Emma before turning to Alexander with equal warmth. "And my soon-to-be son-in-law. How was London?" "Rainy," they answered in unison, then laughed at the synchronicity. As they settled at the table, Emma watched the easy interaction between her mother and Alexander. They'd met several times over the past year, and Alexander had won Catherine over completely with his genuine interest in her life and his obvious devotion to Emma. It had been important to Emma that her mother approve of her choice. Catherine had raised her alone after her father abandoned them, teaching her the value of independence and self-reliance. Seeing her mother so clearly delighted with Alexander warmed Emma's heart. "So, all the final details are set?" Catherine asked as they enjoyed their appetizers. "No last-minute wedding crises?" "Everything's under control," Alexander assured her. "Though I'm convinced the cake will somehow collapse, the flowers will wilt simultaneously, and the ring-bearer, my nephew, will lose the rings. Isn't that how weddings usually go?" Catherine laughed. "Always expect disaster, then be pleasantly surprised when only minor catastrophes occur. That's my philosophy." "Very optimistic, Mom," Emma teased. "I prefer realistic," Catherine corrected with a wink. "But in all seriousness, I'm not worried. You two have managed to maintain a relationship across 5,000 miles for a year. A wedding should be simple by comparison." Her words struck Emma as profoundly true. The past year had tested their commitment in ways neither had fully anticipated when they'd agreed to their bi-continental arrangement. There had been miscommunications, lonely nights, frustrations with technology that failed at crucial moments, and the constant physical yearning for each other that never quite subsided despite their frequent reunions. Yet they had endured and even thrived, developing a depth of communication and understanding that might have taken years to achieve under more conventional circumstances. The distance had forced them to be intentional about their time together, to express their feelings clearly, to trust each other completely. In many ways, it had strengthened what was already a powerful connection. After dinner, as they were walking Catherine back to her hotel, she pulled Emma aside while Alexander moved ahead to speak with the valet. "I'm proud of you, sweetheart," she said softly. "Not just for your professional success, but for finding a way to have that without sacrificing love." Emma squeezed her mother's hand. "I learned from the best, Mom. You showed me what it means to be strong and independent, but you also taught me that the right kind of love doesn't diminish you, it amplifies who you are." Catherine's eyes glistened in the streetlights. "I always hoped you'd find that. Your father and I, well, what we had wasn't real partnership, but what you and Alexander have built together, supporting each other across continents, making space for both your dreams, that's the real thing." The wedding day dawned clear and surprisingly warm for San Francisco, as if the notoriously fickle city had decided to cooperate just this once. They'd chosen a venue overlooking the bay with floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the Golden Gate Bridge and the sparkling water beyond. Standing in a side room with Mia, who was helping her with final preparations, Emma felt a curious blend of calm certainty and giddy excitement. "No cold feet?" Mia asked, adjusting the delicate veil in Emma's dark hair. Emma shook her head. "None. It feels like everything in my life has been leading to this moment, as cliché as that sounds." "Not cliché," Mia corrected. "Just right." She stepped back to assess her handiwork. "You look stunning, Em. Alexander is going to be speechless." Emma smoothed the silk of her gown, an elegant sheath design with subtle beading that caught the light as she moved. "I hope not. He needs to say, 'I do,' at some point." The ceremony itself passed in a blur of emotion. Emma would later remember fragments. The collective intake of breath as she appeared at the end of the aisle, Alexander waiting for her, tall and proud as he stood with the help of specially designed braces and crutches, insistent on meeting her eye to eye for this moment, the warmth of his hands as they exchanged rings, the love shining in his gray eyes as he promised to cherish her all the days of his life. But most vivid in her memory would be the moment after they were pronounced husband and wife when Alexander whispered, "Thank you for stopping to help a stranger who dropped his papers," and she recognized the perfect symmetry of their journey, from that chance meeting in O'Hare to this deliberate, joyful union of their lives. The reception was elegant but intimate, with just over 100 guests gathered to celebrate with them. Eleanor Harrington, somewhat frailer than when Emma had first met her, but still regal in silver-gray silk that matched her son's eyes, offered a toast that brought tears to many eyes. "When Alexander was injured," she began, her voice steady despite the emotion evident on her face, "I feared many things for him. But what frightened me most was the thought that he might never find someone who would truly see him. Not the wheelchair, not the fortune, but the remarkable man he is. Emma, from the moment Alexander told me about you, I knew you were that person. You've given my son the greatest gift possible, the certainty that he is loved for exactly who he is." Alexander squeezed Emma's hand under the table as his mother continued, "And Alexander has given you the space to become fully yourself, supporting your dreams even when they took you an ocean away from him. That, I believe, is the essence of true partnership, not merging into one indistinguishable unit, but standing beside each other, helping each other reach your highest potential." Eleanor raised her glass. "To Emma and Alexander, may your love continue to be a force that elevates you both." As the evening progressed, Emma found a moment alone with Alexander on the venue's terrace, the lights of San Francisco creating a magical backdrop to their private conversation. "Happy, Mrs. Harrington?" he asked, pulling her onto his lap in the wheelchair. "Deliriously, Mr. Harrington," she replied, leaning down to kiss him, "though I'm still getting used to the name change." "You could have kept Carter," Alexander reminded her. "I would have understood." Emma smiled, touching his face gently. "I know, but I want to share your name, even as I'm building my own legacy with it. Emma Harrington, Executive Director of European Digital Operations. It has a nice ring to it." "Indeed it does," Alexander agreed, "though I'm partial to Emma Harrington, my wife, at the moment." They fell silent, watching a container ship glide slowly beneath the Golden Gate Bridge, its lights a string of pearls against the darkening water. "Do you remember," Alexander said after a while, "that night on my island, when you asked if I believed in fate?" Emma nodded, recalling the conversation during their first date. "You said you preferred to think we make our own destiny through our choices." "I still believe that," he continued, "but I also think that sometimes the universe puts opportunities in our path. Chance meetings, missed flights, moments of decision that seem small but change everything." "Like stopping to help a stranger who dropped his papers," Emma murmured. "Exactly." Alexander's eyes held hers, full of love and wonder. "The universe offered us an opportunity that day at O'Hare, but what matters is that you chose to stop, and I chose to ask you for coffee, and we both kept choosing each other, even when it was difficult." Emma leaned her forehead against his. "And we'll keep choosing each other, every day, no matter what challenges come our way." "That's a promise I intend to keep," Alexander whispered, before pulling her into a kiss that felt like both a culmination and a beginning. Inside, their guests were dancing, celebrating, raising glasses to their future. Soon they would rejoin the party, surrounded by the people who had supported their unconventional journey to this moment. There would be more challenges ahead, the continued navigation of their bi-continental life, decisions about where to ultimately establish their primary home, perhaps even children someday. But as they held each other under the San Francisco stars, Emma knew with bone-deep certainty that whatever came next, they would face it together. Two independent souls who had found in each other not limitation but liberation, not compromise but completion. Their love story had begun with a missed flight and a moment of kindness. Now it would continue, not as a fairy tale of rescued princesses or white knights, but as the real, complex, beautiful adventure of two people who had found in each other both a safe harbor and the courage to sail beyond the horizon. If you enjoyed today's video, I'm sure you'll love the next one. Don't waste time. Just click on the screen.